Do you want to wrap up Concrete Couch?
I think that was what's move on.
Yeah. So my name is Jessica Copeland. I work here at Colorado College and the Associate Director of the Partnership for Civic Engagement. Also teaching psychology. I've been a academic psychologist for, 10 years or so, maybe. Let's see. I am up here on this panel today because I am the wife of a Air Force veteran. I actually usually sound much more vigorous and perky than this. I just am having some asthma this morning, so I have to bear with me. So my husband was up on the panel yesterday, actually. Jason Copeland, who's a redhead. Those of you who were here yesterday may remember him. So, let's see. I guess I'll start out by just saying a little bit about myself, briefly. So my research had always been in the development of aggression and masculinity, and what masculinity has to do with violence, and what violence has to do with masculinity, and all that. And my family on my mother's side are Holocaust survivors, so I spent a lot of time, I think, personally and professionally, thinking about how people can grow to, how a group of people can grow to so otherize another community that genocide seems warranted and indeed like the right thing to do and the necessary thing to do. So I've always been interested in that question as well. My grandparents on my mom's side were both in concentration camp and had lost one or both parents, so great-grandparents, to the Holocaust. And growing up, when I could, observing my grandmother in particular at particular times of mourning, around particular dates, particular things that they would show on the television and things like that. And kind of watching my grandmother move in and out of receptivity to talking about what had happened, and watching her move into silence and kind of out of silence, and thinking about the ways in which she enforced silence in her family. So all of these things were kind of, in some ways, priming me towards studying war. And starting in around 2002 or something, I started teaching a class called Developmental Perspectives on Violence, and that had a bunch of stuff in there about war and genocide and state-sanctioned violence and terrorism. And when I got to CU Boulder in maybe 2007, academic school years all blend together, and I don't remember dates. So 2007, I started teaching a class called The Psychology of War. And that class, although it started out as being like this intellectual exercise, quickly became very personal. I had been dating this guy for, I don't know, maybe almost a year or so when I started teaching this class. And that was Jason. And I had met Jason. I was teaching at Vanderbilt, and I was kind of doing my academic thing, And I happened to be in Vegas for a conference around my birthday. And he happened to be in Vegas with his team doing military training. And we crossed paths, and it literally was like one of those things that, shouldn't have happened. And, there was no, I was dating. I was best friends with his best friend's girlfriend or anything. Not like there was no way that this was going to happen had things not laid down exactly the way they laid down. So I met him, and it was sort of, it was like love at first sight. And he told me that he was a climbing guide. which was indeed true, but definitely not the whole story. So I had met him in Vegas, and I was kind of like, I lived in Nashville, and he lived in North Carolina, and I was like, there's no way this is, not happening. Not having a long-distance relationship, not interested, not doing the Vegas thing, you know what I mean? Here's my card, have a nice day, kind of thing. Well, I got back to Nashville, and he called me, and he was very, very persistent. And it slowly he slowly presented, kind of eased me into this whole he's in the military thing, And so he was, I suppose, 6 years into the military at that time. And he was in Air Force Special Operations. And as those of you who were here yesterday know, he was in a field called Combat Control, which does a lot of close air support for any range of special operations functions. And they do a lot of special operations, search and rescue, and things like that. I was unwilling to date someone in the military. When I met him, I was I should also say that my parents were, hippies, Vietnam War protesters. My dad's a conscientious objector, Parents are very liberal. And it just wasn't kind of in my worldview to be receptive. And yet I was so kind of smitten with this man that, all bets were off. There's just no avoiding it. So it took a while for me to kind of wrap my mind around this. And as we kind of I'll speed this up because there's a lot of other things to say. Any number of kind of things that I had to grapple with as sort of a child of hippies and as a feminist and all this, coming to breathe myself into his community, and kind of figuring out, well, can I be this military wife? I don't feel like I am like some of the women that I see in this community. And what I really ended up realizing was that in his particular field, there are, this close-knit group where, yes, indeed, there are a lot of women who got married and had 3 kids right out of high school, but, there's also a professor of women's studies who's one of the wives, and, there's an Olympic athlete who's one of the wives, and it just doesn't fit what my stereotypes would be initially. So I'm happy to talk about that. But one of the things that I think I had sort of intended to talk about really before the really long preface was what it was like for me to have to be in love with someone who's at war. And I don't mean just like, yeah, he's a person that I care about. I mean unadulterated, unequivocally, 100% hook, line, and sinker in love with this person. And what that is like. Jason deployed 3 times since I have been with him, and is now a civilian. But what I would describe as just something that looks like the full range of human experience. There's kind of this, for me, periods of moving obsessively into watching the news and out of engagement, and kind of watching my own cycles around that. One of the things that was really hard about his deployments is that I often didn't even know what theater of operation he was going into when he deployed. People would ask me, oh, where is he? And I would say what he says, which is, it's unclear. That was kind of hard. I didn't know if he's in Iraq or Afghanistan or any number of places that we're not supposed to think that we're going into, but we are going into. So that's hard, for one thing. Just the profound unknowingness of everyday life. It was kind of like, I felt very grounded in who I was. I had this well-developed identity as an academic psychologist and as a climber, and I had a good group of friends. And yet you get up in the morning, you look in the mirror, you wonder how he is. You brush your teeth, you wonder how he is. You go have a breakfast and wonder what he's eating. You wonder what time of day it is because you don't even know what the time change is. It's hard to stay sane in the face of so much uncertainty and fear. It's kind of really easy to move down the path of compulsive something. Compulsive exercise, compulsive shopping, compulsive drinking, smoking, compulsive staying up late, compulsive eating. Anything you can do to kind of not be present with the terror. And so I would really say that over the course of these 3 deployments, I really did experience a kind of a spiritual crisis and a spiritual resolution. And for me, it ended up being this great opportunity to practice being in uncertainty and to practice coping with fear in a healthy way, which is to not do those compulsive things, but to be willing to sit with this fear.